Welcome to the State of Mind virtual speaker series. This series has been developed to provide education and support to youth, caregivers, and educators during this challenging time. This series is a collaboration between two local nonprofits, 1 in 5 and MindPeace, and various community mental health partners. We're glad you're here to educate yourself and to learn how to keep your brain in a healthy state of mind.
Hello, and thank you for joining me for this State of Mind speaker series on coping with anxiety and stress, brought to you by 1 in 5 and MindPeace. My name is Todd Provenzano. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor and supervisor, and I am currently the managing director of partnership with St. Aloysius. Dating myself, I'm going on 28 years now, working with at-risk youth and families in the greater Cincinnati area. And I've been with St. Al's for the past 18 of those years as a family therapist, family therapy supervisor, and clinical director for many years. I've also been fortunate enough to be an adjunct professor with Xavier University's master level mental health counseling program since 2002. I've taught behavioral health research and am currently focused primarily on family therapy. So St. Aloysius has been providing school-based services in partnership with MindPeace for more than a decade now, and I have worked in and/or supervised school-based services for 20 plus years since I first graduated from undergrad back in some decade. So one of the things, in addition to their continuum of care, that makes St. Aloysius relatively unique is that we are fully certified in the sanctuary model of trauma-informed care. And today I'm going to be talking to you about some of the strategies and tools that we use in the sanctuary model to help us cope with anxiety and stress. So I have long believed that the services that we provide as educators, mental health providers, caregivers, are only as good as the people that we put in front of our kids and our families. So we have to stay healthy and functional ourselves to best help others. And I've experienced that firsthand because some of the best and most influential people in my life and career, literally from that first job out of college at Central Fairmount Elementary, have been teachers, have been principals and educators. Even several of my family are teachers. So hands down, and I know this from firsthand experience, you all are among the most caring, unselfish, self-sacrificing, determined, persistent, creative, resilient people that I will ever know in my career. And sometimes stubbornly so. And I mean that in the best possible way, because you have to be day in and day out, right? Excuse me. But that also means that so many of you will push yourselves to the point of exhaustion and breakdown to make sure that the needs of your students and the school community are met before you even begin to pay attention to your own needs. And if that wasn't challenging enough under quote unquote normal circumstances, those good old bygone days of yore that we call last January, it can feel impossible now under whatever this new normal is supposed to be. If you think about it for a second, what happens when you sit by a campfire for a while? You end up smelling like smoke, right? Or you run through the rain, you end up getting wet. Well, when you work in a highly stressful environment with kids, families, and even colleagues who have or are currently experiencing trauma and chronic stress, it's really difficult, especially for people like you who are wired as caregivers, not to internalize a lot of that, to put the weight on your shoulders and carry it around with you back home and then back to work the next day. And so you get into this cycle of chronic stress and anxiety, except now that campfire is a forest fire and that rainstorm is a monsoon. Many of our lives, professionally and personally, have been completely turned upside down. And every day it seems like we're getting whiplash and we're hypervigilant for the next and bigger shoe to drop. So if you're standing in the middle of a forest fire or a monsoon, it can be really, really hard to regain your sense of direction, to see your hand in front of your face, to have a firm sense of control, to know what to prioritize, what to react to, what not to react to be able to solve problems effectively, or even know what the future is going to look like in the next moment, the next week, month, or year down the road. So what Sanctuary does is it helps us take all of that overwhelming and chaotic information that accompanies trauma and stress and organize it into conversations that help us find solutions and strategies for healthier living. At its heart, Sanctuary is about creating a safe, supportive environment in which healing can occur, but also one that inoculates us from the harsher effects of toxic stress and anxiety. So it's not just about creating an environment in which our kids can learn and heal. It's also about creating an environment that protects us, that supports us, and prevents us from carrying the effects of that stress home at night and then back to work, into our relationships, and so on. One of the first tools that Sanctuary gives us to help sort through all that chaotic information is called SELF. It's an acronym that stands for Safety, Emotion, Loss, and Future. So I'm going to go through this real quickly because I think it's an important foundation for creating some of the safety and self-care plans that will help us cope with stress and anxiety. So the first part is safety, and we break that down into actually 4 types of safety. The first one is the one that everybody thinks about first, and that's physical safety. Are we safe from violence or aggression from others, whether that's physical, emotional, verbal, or sexual? Is there an absence of suicidality or self-destructive behavior? That we're not abusing substances, that we have our basic needs being met, that we're practicing good health and good hygiene, and so on down the road. So physical safety is really straightforward, but there's also psychological, social, and moral safety. Psychological safety means that we have a sense of self-awareness, what we're good at, what we're capable of, and where our limitations are, that we have a healthy sense of self-esteem, control, and empowerment, and that we're self-disciplined, that we're making good choices that balance rational thinking and emotional thinking, doesn't go too far in one direction or the other. Social safety means that we have safety in our relationships, and we're safe with our colleagues, our social groups, our peers, our friends, and that we're exercising responsible authority, that we both work in an environment where there's not an abuse of power, and that we, as a result of stress, aren't inadvertently abusing our power within the school environment. And then finally, moral safety is one that often gets overlooked, but I think is really, really important in the world right now with COVID and social strife, racial injustice, and it's an election year. So there are a lot of different moral tug-of-wars going on. But essentially, it comes down to, teachers are familiar with this, especially the pre-K, is that, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten. Share, play fair, don't hit people, put things back where you found them, clean up after yourself, social responsibility, don't take things that aren't yours, say you're sorry when you hurt somebody, wash your hands, that's a big one these days, and flush, are all things that we do to protect our moral safety. But I think on a deeper level these days, there are a lot of moral conversations about COVID and the lengths that we should or should not go to safeguard public health with racial inequality and social justice, Black Lives Matter. A lot of moral conversations are happening both internally as we examine our own values and beliefs, and externally as we try to adapt and evolve those values and beliefs towards the betterment and growth of society. And then, of course, in an election year, we're challenged every day, barraged with seeming moral dilemmas in terms of the issues and people that we're going to vote for. So moral safety, I think, takes a prominent role in our current environment. one of the first things that we do when we're looking at self is to unpack what safety, emotion, loss, and feelings mean to individuals and a group of people, to know where they're coming from, where they're starting with, so that we can start with the things that, present the most difficulty. So these are exercises that we went through with the educators at St. Al's, and also as part of a support forum online that we did for CPS employees a couple of months ago. So I'm just going to go through this real quickly. This is some of the feedback that we got, and I encourage you as we go through to maybe, see what you empathize with and maybe add some of your own. Obviously, under physical safety, there's the fear of getting sick, family members getting sick. You're worried about your students getting sick, their physical safety, because you don't get to check in with them every day anymore. You don't know, in a lot of cases, what's happening to them. That's a big worry. In the COVID environment, with so much uncertainty about jobs, whether it's us directly in mental health or education, or our families, our spouses, there's worry about job security and financial security. There's a tug of war of, some places are exercising more safety precautions in terms of health versus others, some people versus others. Some of those are physical limitations, some of those are personal choices. But we're constantly, I don't know if you're having dreams about all of this yet, but we're constantly vigilant about our surroundings now and how safe they are. In a lot of ways, that gives us a newfound empathy for what a lot of our students experience on a daily basis. Will opening schools work? What will that look like? And that goes under moral safety too. And then looking at the peaceful protests and the escalation there. And I do want to make a distinction between the peaceful protests and those that do escalate towards destruction or violence. They're very different things. But the ones that do escalate affect a lot of our kids and families, and us personally, where we live or where our businesses are located, our families' businesses are located. So that's another physical safety concern. Psychological, the disruption of our routines, everything that was familiar and predictable in our days. We have a real sense of how much that has been turned upside down, and we're having to find new structure, new routines. Fear for the future, worrying about what that's going to look like, whether it's job security, health, and well-being. And then, of course, confronting racial attitudes, social injustice. Pardon me. Those issues are at the forefront. We're having a lot of internal conversations with ourselves and close family members, and then socially and organizationally. That presents a challenge to psychological safety, social safety, because of a lot of these restrictions. People are more isolated. Extroverts are definitely feeling the shrinking of their social circles, but even introverts like me, who rely on family and friends for social support and self-care, are really feeling the effects of not being around people in person, that loss of physical contact, hugs, handshakes, pats on the back, those sorts of things. Socially, again, we're talking about racial inequality, social injustices. That has led to some challenging, eye-opening, and difficult conversations, but also opportunities for growth. Nonetheless, socially, our safety is being challenged, and not all in a bad way, but even, growth and change are sometimes difficult. Moral. Is it safe to go back to school? We're having these arguments as recently this week, not arguments, debates, conversations, I guess in some cases arguments about whether or not it's safe to go back to school. And people fall at all different places along the continuum. Keep them closed, go all remote, open them up in a hybrid fashion. Go back, 5 days a week in person. And there are a lot of pros and cons to be argued for each one of those options, but all of them present some cognitive dissonance, some moral dissonance because they all come with those benefits and costs. Different views on public health, going too far with public health safety or not far enough. Racial inequality, social justice. Again, we talked about that under social and psychological. And whether or not we can even teach effectively remotely. That's causing a lot of angst among a lot of teachers, challenging us to consider the impact globally, locally of Black Lives Matter, and to evolve and move forward based on those conversations and challenges. Those are all moral safety considerations that we're being confronted with these days. Emotions are all over the map, and that's why that word roller coaster is in the middle. Some people feel sad and angry and helpless and defeated and disappointed and unbalanced, shocked still over what has happened to us both personally as a society. Even amidst all that, some people are feeling hopeful and excited because they're learning new skills, new avenues for connecting with people, with students, engaging parents that they weren't able to reach before. And they're really experiencing some success in that regard. Others overwhelmed, hypervigilant from how long this has gone on. So feelings run the gamut, and you should certainly add your own to that word cloud. A lot of people are feeling a profound sense of loss these days. With any change, there is loss. Even good change, getting married, moving, getting a promotion, they all come with a different kind of loss and stress of what's familiar and predictable from your previous life and circumstances to now. But I think that's even more profound these days. I've spoke with a number of teachers who are feeling a loss of professional identity, their sense of purpose, self-worth, fulfillment, so invested in being able to teach and impact their kids' lives day in and day out, and now forced to do it remotely, imperfectly, and incompletely because of COVID. The loss of familiar routines, the way you plan, what you plan, how you plan, the loss of control over that. Loss of structure comes up a lot too. Hard to maintain that work-life balance when you're working from home. There's no longer that concrete separation between I'm at work, I go home, and now I can focus on my personal life. People are feeling like I'm on call 24/7. I'm constantly trying to figure out a better way to do this, or learn a new technology, or answer the emails as they come in, text messages. I can't get everybody when I'm trying to get them. So even if that opportunity is in the evening or early in the morning, I respond to it. And so there's this high level of vigilance. Loss of one-on-one interactions, just engaging with others, the relationships with students, the spontaneous moments, the laughter, the aha moments, the milestones, achieving, celebrating success. We're not doing that as often or in the same ways, and that takes a toll. The loss of nonverbal communication through remote learning. If you're exhausted from teaching online or doing trainings and meetings online, it's not you. There's a real psychological reason for why that is. We lose so much of the nonverbal and social communication cues that we rely on in relationships remotely, that we're paying extra attention. Our brains behind the scenes are working extra hard to try to fill in the gaps. And that's why you can feel 10 times as tired after something like this as you would doing it in person. On top of that, you're teaching in crisis mode, and that also adds to that sense of urgency and exhaustion. A lot of people have talked about the loss of sense of time. What day is it? What week is it? What month is it? I can't believe it's August already, and the election's 3 months away, and gosh, there was January again. The loss of professional relationships, interacting, debriefing, laughing with colleagues. You realize how much a part of your self-care and social support network they are when you're not able to just hang at the water cooler in a doorway, or after school in the parking lot. All the ways that we interact with colleagues, loss of family and social supports, the physical closeness, affection, really limits our self-care options. The loss of academic and social progress. I know for me, when it comes to mental health outcomes, boredom is not a good thing. And I'm sure it's the same for academics. Not only are kids out there without the schedule and the structure and the routine academically, but you don't have that same sense of consistency and continuity, and so you worry about the academic and social progress in addition to the mental health goals for some of our kids falling behind. And then finally, the loss of freedom is one that I'm sure all of us feel in one way or another, whether it's just the limitations as we follow public health guidelines, or the ability to move around, take a vacation, self-care. The loss of freedom is a big one that we're all feeling right now. And finally, we always end ourselves with a conversation about the future, because that's really where we start to look at solutions. What do we need to be able to adapt to and overcome some of the safety, emotion, and loss issues that might be weighing on us right now? So a lot of people understandably are saying, well, I want to become more technologically savvy, and we've had to do that in a hurry. Others, they're learning more about how to effectively teach through remote learning. I think we were thrown into it, so quickly we had to adapt on the fly. People have had an opportunity over the summer to be more planful and learn and apply different strategies to remote learning, to adapt and create new routines and self-care plans. We can't be as mobile or connect socially the way we were before, but what can we do? I've seen social cocktail hours. My mom teaches dance lessons over Zoom. She's got one camera on her and then another on her feet, and so she gets to interact with her groups on a weekly basis. So creative ways to reach out and create new routines, maintain consistent structure and expectations to account for challenges, to set clear boundaries between home and work life, professional and personal, so that they aren't blending together and you're not neglecting your self-care. To accept that it's normal and permissible to have strong and often conflicting feelings about, what's going on, and that we may not be able to fully resolve those effectively. To carve out and protect your personal time for self-care. Give yourself permission to turn off the alerts and return non-urgent messages at a later time. Stay active. Seek out changes of sceneries where you can. If it's outside, socially distance, it's good to get out. Have remote partners. And this is an important one we're going to talk about in the safety plans. But stay planful with what you're doing. And having remote partners helps you stay planful and be accountable, not only for what's going to happen the next day or the next week, but to help you stay focused on your goals and your self-care plans, and being motivated to achieve those. Eat well, exercise, get enough sleep. Pretty self-explanatory. Actively participate in actions and strategies to improve our social landscape. That can be done in a lot of ways, remotely or within safe health guidelines. Create opportunities for personal and professional development. Read books, attend seminars. Develop new skills that meet the moment. And this is one of my favorites that I heard from a teacher on our CPS call. Give yourself some grace. Recognize that you're doing the best you can under crazy circumstances. Recognize the limits to what you can and can't control, and keep doing your best. You may not always know how to do it or what to do. Just know that you're doing your best in the effort to do it. And so that's self, safety, emotion, loss, and future. I encourage you to go through that individually, because that's going to set up what we're going to talk about next, which is your safety and self-care plans. So a couple of basic beliefs that are important for the sanctuary model is that, adversity is an inherent part of human life. It's natural and it's normal, as unpleasant as it may be. But we also, a lot of times, have the resources and resilience that we need to heal from those experiences. So we believe that we will come out on the other side of this, and we'll hopefully be better for it. Another one, and I really want to emphasize this point, is the perspective that asks what's happened to you rather than what's wrong with you when you're organizing your goals and you're assessing your strengths and challenges. And the reason I say that is because when you ask a student or even yourself, what's wrong with you, it automatically implies that the cause for what's wrong is in you, that you bear the burden or have some character deficit or flaw that is causing what's wrong to be wrong. Whereas if you ask what's happened to you, it externalizes those challenges and opens up a whole new world for conversation about solutions, while at the same time reducing your students or your own defensiveness to change. What's happening to you right now is COVID. What's happening to you right now is racial inequality and social injustice. What's happening right now is the stress of an election year. And we're all doing our best to adapt within the scope of what's happening to us. So I really want to emphasize enough when you're having those conversations in your head about, if I was a good teacher, I would, or, if I had better coping skills than I could. That's asking what's wrong with you, when the better question is what's happening to you, and what internal resources and external resources do you have to, then address what's happening to you. So that's really important one. So this one is not a pun intended, but it's really apropos for the moment. And that is, you can think about your brain's exposure to stress and anxiety and trauma the same way that you think about a computer's exposure to a computer virus. For anybody who's ever had a computer virus, you know that it just wreaks havoc on your computer. It either runs slow, it doesn't work correctly, it shuts down entirely, it locks down, and you just can't access what's inside. And so for our brains to think rationally, we have to feel safe with each other and safe within our environments. And if we don't feel that way, either due to the virus, racial strife, social injustice, election year, all those things that are chronic sources of stress and safety concerns, then that operating system, not the computer, our brains, can really start to be impaired on multiple different levels. We're not thinking clearly. It's hard to prioritize what we need to do in a moment-by-moment, day-to-day basis. It affects our relationships with others. Maybe we're avoidant. Maybe we're, short or irritable. How we sleep, the quality of sleep, how long we sleep, whether we sleep, what we eat. I know I stress ate for a while, chocolate. It affects how we take care of ourselves, our productivity, how long it takes us to get things done, the quality of our work, the satisfaction that we derive from our relationships and the quality of our work. Creative planning, starts to become dull and unenthusiastic. And that can lead to a sense of isolation, real or imagined. We can start to daydream or disassociate, to go off in our own worlds, in our own minds, to get away from the stress and anxiety. That can lead to physical symptoms. When I go on vacation, it takes me 2 or 3 days just to decompress and get all that stress off of me to where I feel like I'm relaxing. And so if you don't have that safety planning and that self-care, it's like going on vacation. You need a couple of days to decompress. If you don't have that, it can start to lead to physical symptoms. We start to, maybe become more abusive. Hopefully not more aggressive or physically abusive. We can self-medicate, substance abuse. Other bad habits start to get a foothold if we don't properly take care of ourselves. So just like a virus affects the computer in all of the ways that it does, it's as harmful to our brains to be exposed to chronic stress and trauma over time. So what we're looking for are tools and solutions that are going to promote positive change in our students and our families and ourselves, that are going to, maximize one another's strengths and minimize one another's weaknesses. We're best when paired with someone who, makes up for the things that we don't do well. I do this really well. You don't. I got your back. You do that really well. I don't. You've got my back. So we can really support each other and prop one another up. And that includes, during rough times, emotionally, socially, morally, spiritually. And that's what's going to end up buffering us from the impact of repetitive stress. So essentially, we're looking for tools and strategies that become the antivirus and really inoculate from those effects, us from those effects. So today what I'm going to talk about is safety plans. This is one of the most straightforward tools that you can use, even though it doesn't always come naturally, to start to cope with stress and anxiety. So safety plans in a nutshell are concrete visual reminders of how important it is for us to manage our emotions, keep ourselves and others safe, and it's going to include both individual and relational activities that we can do when we're feeling overwhelmed, so that we can, avoid putting ourselves in harm's way. So the activities, we want them to be appropriate for the time and the place, simple enough to achieve, they have a good beginning and end. There's something that you can do individually or with someone else, but they're within your control. They must be safe, effective, and also self-soothing. So safety plans are going to help us stay safe by regulating our emotions. And what I mean by that is when we're overwhelmed with stress and anxiety, when we're dealing with the effects of trauma, we can start to make decisions based on an imbalance of emotion versus a balance between rational thinking and emotion. And the more traumatic an event or toxic the stress, the more we can put ourselves in unsafe situations. So our safety plans are going to give us a way to maintain safety by regulating our emotions. And that's going to help give us back a sense of control over our feelings and allow us to think and behave rationally versus reactively. Okay. It really helps to begin with a self-exercise that we went through to identify which emotions are most difficult for you individually and to strategize accordingly. Trauma is different for different people. For some people, both their internal and external resources are completely overwhelmed and an event is perceived as traumatic. For other people, internally, I might not have great coping skills, but I have a super strong social support network to get me through it. Or I might not have a great social support network, but I have great, resilient internal coping skills that offset that. And so for some people, it's going to be anger that they want to focus on. For others, it might be sadness or loss. So take some time to work through that self and focus on the things that are important to you. These are plans that can be adjusted over time as you get more skillful and you practice and circumstances change. So make sure you're adapting them as you go. And then finally, safety plans can be a good exercise in emotional intelligence. They can really serve to increase your internal awareness of where you are emotionally and how that affects your decision making and your interactions with others. And also, by asking what's happening to other people, get a sense of what they're going through, what they're reacting to, and how their feelings may be guiding their interactions with you. That's why it's nice to have a balance of internal individual safety plans and relational ones. As you put together your safety plan, make sure that you're remembering those 4 domains of safety and you're coming up with strategies for the physical, psychological, social, and moral aspects of your life. And for some, maybe more in one category than the other. Well, first of all, again, this is a list of activities that's going to help keep us safe. It's going to help prevent us from losing our temper or just quitting on an activity or not holding up our end of the bargain with responsibilities, to maybe some more dangerous, self-destructive, unsafe behaviors like self-medicating or relational conflict. Whatever you choose to do, make sure that it's simple enough that you can achieve it and that it's something that you can do individually, that you're in control of, that you don't have to rely on someone else to determine whether or not you can do it or whether or not it's successful. Now, you are going to maybe have some safety plan items that you do with another person, and that's fine. Just make sure that you have that balance of things that you can do that are under your control. Creating safety plans as a group has the added benefit of creating a sense of community and support. It can really lift you up when you need a boost. Because frankly, I'll admit there are days when I want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't even have the patience to focus on my safety plan, much less do the things that are on it. But the people around me can see that sense that they offer the sense of support, encouragement, motivation. And I can do the same for them when they're having one of those days. It's also a reminder that these aren't skills that come naturally to everybody. They need to be learned and practiced. We don't automatically do progressive muscle relaxation. We don't automatically go into deep breathing or do some of the other things that we identify. But with time and practice, they can become automatic. And that's what's really going to help start to consistently dial down our sense of stress and anxiety. Make sure that you can do them anywhere. Not all of the things you choose will be appropriate for the school setting or the classroom. Choose some that you can do outside, and then choose some that you can apply within the classroom. That silent prayer, maybe counting backwards from 10, a couple of deep breaths, and so on. So those are just some examples of what you can do. Now, my wife likes to massage the meaty part of her hand between the forefinger and thumb because it's a trigger point for relieving headaches. So that's another one that she taught me. So here's an example of a 5-step safety plan. And of course, you're going to create your own, but you could listen to some music for an hour. Maybe that's not something you can do in a classroom. You could take a break as a group and maybe listen to some music. Or have some music playing quietly in the background during a class activity where they're focused on an assignment, or during a break. Take a walk outside with your dog for 30 minutes. Again, maybe not in a classroom, but you can get up, roam around the room a little bit, get out from behind the desk, get some blood flowing, stretch out a little bit, take a break during recess or lunch, and do a lap around the building. A couple other things: polish shoes, call a friend, crisis number, and if it's a more urgent situation. But collectively and individually, identify things you can do in the environment where, through the self, you identified where you experience the most distress. Some other ideas that have come up in conversations: positive self-talk. A pastor who was counseling me one time said, you can't stop the birds from flying over your head, but you can stop them from nesting in your hair. And so what he meant by that is you're not always going to be able to avoid negative situations or those negative thoughts creeping in, but you can put a stop to them. You can replace them with more positive self-talk or alternative thoughts, so that you're not ruminating on the negative. Take deep breaths, drink of water. If you have a partner that you can hand off your responsibilities to briefly, take a 5-minute break, come back, give them the same thing. Take a time out. Find a calming corner or a fun activity that you can do. Talk to a trusted person or colleague in your environment. And then maybe focus on what you're going to do as part of your self-care plan afterwards that's going to give you a little bit of boost of energy and hope towards later in the day. My own self-care plan looks a little bit like that guy on the right. I love to look at pictures of family and pets on my phone or travel. That guy's my 23-pound Maine Coon. He's just a mellow mushroom, and he can instantly take my blood pressure down 10 or 15 points. Thought stopping, you know what I was saying about the birds flying over your head but not nesting in your hair. If you start to run wild with negative thoughts, just say stop. Stop. And then focus on a pre-prepared positive replacement thought or self-care activity instead. Relax my body. It's amazing if you maybe set a chime on your phone, it goes off and you remind yourself to let the tension drain out of your body, how quickly it has crept in and you haven't even realized. Move around the room. That's one of my favorites. I love to be mobile when I present. This is driving me nuts, staying in front of the computer while I talk to all of you. So I'll be moving around shortly after this. And then I'm a big sports fan. I love to cook. So if I get a chance to read the latest sports news or look up a recipe while I hug the cat, that always makes me feel a little better. Not things I can do in every situation, but enough things that I can do in each situation. I'll tell you what, I get to roam a little bit more at the agency, and so it's always nice to take a break and just say hi and check in with a friend, how they're feeling, and get a boost that way too. Make sure you go back and work through the self-tool individually so that you can identify the areas that you most want to focus on for your safety plan. You're going to list 5 things that you can do when you're feeling stressed out and unsafe, overwhelmed, to help regulate those emotions. You should always have a fail-safe plan on your safety plan. It may not be one of the 5 things, an addendum at the end. So just calling 911 or your therapist or a friend or family member that can help encourage and support and de-escalate you through a crisis. Hopefully you'll never need it, but it's there if you do. Include things that can be done without much thought, because frankly, if your safety plan takes a lot of work, then it's not a safety plan. It's just adding to your stress and anxiety, not alleviating it. Make sure you put it in a place where you're going to see it frequently: pocket, wallet, refrigerator, mirror, frame on your desk, home screen on your phone, just to remind you to practice these skills on a regular basis until they become automatic. Show it to a friend or a colleague, somebody who can encourage and support you while you're using these strategies, and then start practicing it now and practice it in a place where you can get some support and reinforcement for using it. So that's it for our talk on coping with stress and anxiety using tools and strategies from the Sanctuary Model for Trauma-Informed Care. I highly, highly encourage you to look at the Mindpiece and 1 in 5 websites. Tremendous database for resources and strategies along these lines. And make sure you also check out the other videos in the 1 in 5 speaker series, because they cover a lot of really, really important and helpful topics. With that said, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to spend this time with you. What you are doing is so tremendously important. We need you now as much as ever, and we've always needed you as much as ever. So please take good care of yourselves. Stay safe, stay healthy, and be well. Thanks.
A special thank you to our State of Mind speakers and to you for joining us. More videos and educational resources can be found at 1 in 5's website. If you feel like you or your child is in need of professional support, therapists are available. Please refer to MindPeace's school-based or community resource page. For a mental health crisis or emergencies, patients and families are encouraged to contact their current mental health provider first. This allows the mental health provider who knows your child best to provide support and direction. If your child does not have a mental health provider and they are experiencing a non-life-threatening mental health crisis, you are encouraged to contact the Psychiatric Intake Response Center at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. 513-636-4124. Call 911 or go to the emergency department if you are experiencing a medical emergency, a life-threatening mental health crisis, or are directed to go there by a medical provider. This will help limit the spread of COVID-19 in our community and allow our emergency departments to care for patients with the most critical needs first.